Hey there, Aubrey. What's shaking?
I'm great. How are you, Lindsay?
Good. I have a question for you.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's hear it. Yeah.
So, when is the last time that you did something for all your worth?
Ooh, I like this expression for all your worth. I think, I played what's the game called with the rope? Tug of war, where you're both
Yes.
pulling on the ends. I don't know if
Yes.
you guys
Yes.
have this where you live out there
We know
listening.
that.
It's like
Hmm.
each team is pulling on separate ends of a rope.
Yeah.
And I was pulling for all I'm worth, like pulling with my full strength. I'm pretty competitive.
Oh, wow. Okay. And I can see that. I can see that. The competitiveness coming out, right?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
This is
Interesting.
interesting. We got a good question about this word worth. And as I planned this episode, I realized how many expressions and idioms, how many ways we use this in English. So we'll
Yes.
read the question here, and then we're definitely going to need to do two. It says this is part one, and there will be a part two here on Allers English because there's so much to cover.
Wow, amazing. All right, so I'm going to read Graziella's question. This is
Yes.
from Graziella Ferreira. And she says, "Hi, I love your show. It helps me a lot and it's a lot of fun. Could you talk about the use of the word worth and the various ways it can be used?" Graziella from Rio, Brazil. Oh my gosh, such a great question.
Yes, and it has so many meanings, right? So we're going to share the meanings of worth as an adjective and as a noun today. And then in part two, we'll share idioms with worth. So be sure to hit follow so that you don't miss that episode.
Yeah, and I'm glad to hear that Graziella feels that the show is helping her and it's also
Yes.
fun, right? We're busting the myth that to learn English, we have to be bored. It's not true.
No, it
When
is
we
fun.
focus on the right things, which is
Yes.
connection, right,
Right?
Aubrey?
It's well worth your time. Wink, wink. Used worth there in one of the many ways we use it.
That's right. I love that. So good. All right. So, where are we getting started? There's the first bucket of meaning is what,
Yes.
Aubrey?
It's worth as value, meaning the value of something. We use it both as an adjective and a noun. For example, to say, what do you think this is worth as an adjective here, right? Meaning, like, what should the price be?
Yes, right. Or for example, this cake wasn't worth the money. Oh man, these days, I
Is
feel like a
anything worth
lot
it?
of things are not worth the money.
I think there's a lot. I go to restaurants, so I'm like, that was delicious, but was it worth
Restaurant,
the money?
not worth the money. Yeah, it's true. I don't wanna go on too long because we've talked about this, but inflation is a little out of
Yes,
control,
it
right? And
is.
you
It
go,
really
you
is.
spend a lot of money, and then you think it really wasn't worth it,
Wasn't
you
worth
know?
it. I know, right? But we
Yeah.
also use this to talk about a person's value. And it's a noun here to say she doesn't know her own worth. She doesn't know her
Mhm.
worth. And then we
Right.
also use the adjective self worth or the noun self worth, which is your internal sense of being good enough and worthy of love and belonging from other people. So you
Mhm.
could replace that and say she doesn't know her own self worth, which means the same. Those are interchangeable.
Yes, good. I love it. So that is the first bucket of meaning, talking about value. Value in terms of exchange of goods or services or food,
Hmm.
or your own value, your own
Exactly.
inner value, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And number two is very similar. It's this chunk worth the something. We used it there. This cake isn't worth the money, but we don't just use this with money. We'll say worth the time, the effort, the trouble, the hassle that something takes. So there's a lot of nouns that we'll add after worth the.
Okay. So the construction is it's worth the something, meaning the thing you have to put in to get the reward, right?
Exactly. So, for example, this hike will be worth the trouble. You're not going to believe the views. So, it might
Yeah.
be difficult, but it's worth the effort. It's worth the trouble.
Yeah, and I will say as a hiker, I hike a lot in the summer. I feel hiking in the West is way more worth the work, let's say, than it is in the East because you you hike
The
in the East,
views.
they don't have switchbacks in the East. You
Mm.
go straight up the mountain and you get to the top and then everything is still covered with trees because you're not that high.
So, you just see
Whereas in the
trees.
West, you come out of the tree line early in the hike if you're doing like a
Mm.
14er or a 13er, 13,000 feet, and the views are just way better for the
Uh,
amount of work you're putting into it. Don't you
Lindsay, you
think?
would do well on a vacation. I went to Sedona with girlfriends. I may have
Oh,
mentioned this
yeah,
on
how
the
was that
podcast.
trip? You
It was
yeah,
very fun, but I had to fight tooth and nail to get them to do a 1 mile hike. And
and
it was
how did it
great.
go?
beautiful red rock views, but I would have loved to do some of those 5, 6 mile hikes where you get to a very cool arch
Yes.
or something really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
They were not having it.
Oh, man, we'll have to do an all ears English retreat in
Yes,
Sedona, and
that'd be
for that one,
amazing.
we'll go for a hike for sure.
Would love that, yes.
All right, cool. So, yeah, so that's a good example. Some hikes are just not worth it, some are, right?
Yeah, and you might
Um
say, "Was the trip worth the hassle?" Like, if someone's
Mhm.
sharing that, "Oh, this went wrong and this went wrong," you might ask them that, like, "Was the vacation worth the hassle?"
Yeah, and just to come back on the topic we were just talking about, I could turn around and ask you, Aubrey, was it worth the hassle, or was it worth the work to go and try to convince your friends to take that mile-long hike?
Was it
Was it
worth the
worth it?
work? Yes, yes, absolutely, and they
Okay,
enjoyed it. Luckily, it was just a mile, but I had found one that it was still, it was beautiful,
nice.
but it wasn't. West Fork is the hike I wanted to do where you're, it's sort of following the river the entire time, and it's beautiful, but it's like 8 miles.
Wow, yeah, okay, that sounds intense for that group
To
for
them,
sure.
that wouldn't have been worth the effort or worth the time, right? They
I
wanted to
see.
go to the spa, they wanted to tour the vineyard, so
Different
they didn't have time for a 10-mile
yeah.
hike.
Interesting. Okay, so I think we've described this well for our listeners. So,
Mhm.
guys, the best way to make sure you're learning this is think in your life. What would you ask if you asked yourself this question right now? What would you say to yourself? Is X worth Y? Is the amount of time I spend working out worth it in terms of how I feel, or
Right.
really anything? Any question you want to ask yourself? It matters how we spend our time, right?
Exactly, right? Is it worth the time? Is it worth the effort? And there are so many ways still. We're gonna share a couple more ways to use worth.
Right, we're back, and now we have a new construction with worth. What is it, Aubrey?
I love this one. It's worth plus a verb ing phrase. So, very similar meaning to worth the blank, but the construction's a little different. Instead of worth the noun, it's worth verb ing. So, for example, it's worth spending money for higher quality.
Right, or it's not always worth making the effort, right, when we don't
Or
see the
this hike
return.
wasn't worth waking up early. So it's similar, right? If you're saying this wasn't worth the time, this wasn't worth the, and then instead you can say the action that you did, was it worth waking up early?
Yeah, and the grammar here is super important. We can't make a mistake here, right? So, worth doing something ing form, right? Verb plus
Yes.
ing, that matters, okay?
Exactly. And we use this all the time. So I'm so excited for you because this is interesting. This is a great topic for connection. Was whatever you did worth the action?
Yeah. Aubrey, are you a concert person? Do you like to go to because
No, you
concerts
and I
are
have talked
pretty
about this.
expensive.
We're not really
Yeah.
concert people. It's expensive. It's loud. My hearing, I have to wear earplugs now when I go.
It's
So,
loud. Sometimes
yeah,
you can't even and if you go to certain ones, you can't even sit down. It's a standing room.
right. It's not worth the money.
Yeah.
It's not worth the hearing loss. It's not
Yeah.
worth leaving 12 hours ahead of time to get parking or whatever.
Right. So you could say in this form, concerts aren't worth losing my hearing for. Concerts aren't
Exactly.
worth losing my hearing for, right? That would be
Mhm.
the way to use this construction in that way.
Exactly. Yes. All
Mhm.
right. And our last one, worth it. We use this all the time, and we're sharing two ways we do it. The first is worth it with an exclamation, which
Yes.
means something's enjoyable or useful despite the fact that you have had to make effort. So
Mhm.
you might say, like, do you think this is worth it? Meaning whatever effort you're putting in or the price you're spending.
Mhm. Good.
Let's do a
Or
little
how
role
long.
play to show this here.
Okay. Yeah.
You start us
All
out.
right. All right. So you bought an RV, right? Worth it?
Oh, and this is the question. So I would end that. Oop,
Oh,
we flipped. Here, let's do the other role
whoop.
play. I've got them in the wrong order. I'll start us
Oh,
out.
okay.
Ready?
Okay, yes, go
That
ahead.
softball game was fun yesterday, but I'm so sore today.
Worth it though. Yes.
Yes, right? So this is how we do it with an exclamation. You're saying worth it. I answer this way a lot.
Yes.
Like if we both went to a softball game, it was fun, but we're sore. And you might say something like that. And I'd be like, worth
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll even hear people say hashtag worth it.
Interesting. Sure, you could see that. I added though, which wasn't even in our
Mm,
notes, but it felt like I needed something to reflect what you just said for me in
mm.
that moment.
Worth it though.
Yeah, as a
Yeah, I can see
response.
that. Especially
Yeah.
you're maybe thinking you hadn't gone. So you're
Yeah.
telling me like, yeah, worth
Oh,
it though. I'm
yeah,
imagining we
exactly.
both went and
We
you're
both
saying
went. In
like,
that
I'm
case,
sore too, worth it.
that makes sense. That makes sense. So it
Yeah,
depends on the context. If we've both gone, it would make sense. I would be right in there with you
totally.
responding, and it makes total sense. But if I didn't go to the game,
Then I
ah,
think you're right. Worth it though. Or asking, worth it though?
right, exactly.
Mhm.
And then what else, Aubrey?
Yeah, so we also do it as a question, worth it, like that. And
Okay.
it's like, worth it though, worth it. So
Okay.
let's do a little role play to show that.
So you bought an RV, right? Worth it?
Yes, we save a ton on hotels wherever we go. So this
Wow.
we'll use that just as a question, like, oh, you spent a lot on this, worth it? Meaning like, do you think it was worth the money? Or if you're like, oh, you went on an 8-hour hike, worth it?
Yeah. I feel like this is great because it's important. This concept of using this word worth in so many different grammatical formats means
Yes,
that our resources matter to us, right? We talk about our resources, money, time, strength, energy. These are all resources, and it's a good conversation topic with people. Was this thing worth it? Was it worth
absolutely.
doing X? Big conversation topic in English,
It's such a
right?
great way to get deeper if someone tells you what they did over the weekend, and they're sharing that it was either expensive or a lot of work. This is a great way to get deeper about their values. Was it worth it? Do you think it was worth it?
And also for like best kept secrets, let's say there's this
Yes.
restaurant, but you have to hike to the restaurant and you have to, I don't know, hike for 10 miles to get there. Or
That
is
reminds me
it
of
really
a
worth
hidden
it?
pizza place in Las Vegas that my husband was able to find, but it took them a little bit of hunting, kind of like a speakeasy. Sometimes it's not easy to find.
Yeah.
So I know I asked him this, like, worth it? Was it worth the time you spent trying to find this like secret pizza parlor? And he was like, yes, it was delicious.
Yeah, 100%. Or when I was living in South America, I was traveling for a year and I was in Uruguay and there's this little town called Cabo Polonio and you can only reach it on foot. So you have to walk through this like beach desert thing, not beach, just a desert it took like 3 hours to
Mm,
walk to get
wow.
to this town, totally isolated town, but there's no electricity in this town. And so it's kind of a best kept secret among the backpackers
Yeah.
in Uruguay. Yes, Cabo Polonio is totally worth it. Right. And this could start
Okay.
a lot of conversations, but you do have to use your resources, which is time, energy, your fitness, you know,
Exactly, right? I never
planning.
would have been able to get my girlfriends that went with me to Sedona to do that. They would have been a hard pass from the
I know.
get-go.
Yeah, no, I don't think that would have been for them.
But it sounds amazing. I've gotta take
Yeah,
someone else so
it's
that I can go
it's
do it.
amazing. It's amazing there because, the fact that it's so isolated from the rest of the
Mm.
world and there's no electricity, so there's no debris in at night. So
Oh,
the stars are just incredible there.
yes,
Yeah.
no light pollution. Oh, that would be
Yes.
gorgeous. That's
It's
awesome.
very cool. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's get into. Oh, first, Aubrey, we did want to mention to our listeners there's a great way to consume All Ears English. What is it?
Yes, be sure that you are using our app. You can follow along with the episode with the transcripts, and you can also get words that we highlight and define for you with example sentences that make it's the best way to learn new vocabulary with the episode.
Yes, you got it. So, guys, go check out the app, allearsenglish.com/app. It is the way to consume All Ears English if you want to up level your English game. All right. Good.
Yes. Awesome. Let's jump into a role play. We are on a cruise on this role play.
Okay.
That would be fun. You a
That would
cruiser?
be
Have you ever
I'm
been
not
on a
a
cruise?
cruiser. I'm not a cruiser. I've
No.
been to a place that felt like a cruise, and we got in,
Oh,
when we
interesting.
were in Egypt, we were at a beach resort, and it felt like a
Ah.
cruise, and so we would call each other cruisers,
Oh,
and we
that's
would kinda make
funny.
fun of the scenario because it felt just like a
It was like
cruise.
an
I'm like
all-inclusive resort and it
Yeah,
felt like a cruise. Totally. That's
yes,
really funny.
it did. It was so funny, but I'm not really a cruiser. Are you a
Gotcha.
cruiser, Aubrey,
I
in
think so.
general?
I've only been on one. I took my
Okay.
kids. I loved it, and I would love to go again. It was
I can
amazing.
see that there is definitely a reason to take a cruise. I get it. It makes
Especially
sense to
for a
me.
mom with a bunch of kids,
Mhm.
so you don't have to
Totally.
cook at all, and you're able to spend all this fun family time together without planning anything. It's a
Yes.
mom's dream vacation.
Love it. So
Yeah.
good. All right. Well, let's get
I'll
into it.
start us
Let's
out. Ready?
imagine. Yes.
Was that pottery class worth your while?
Yeah, I really liked it. What about the jujitsu class?
Yes, it was definitely worth waking up early for.
Y- You ended up buying unlimited drinks, right? Worth it?
No, I don't think so. I haven't used it much at all.
Oh no, someone left their watch here on the table. Looks fancy. What do you think it's worth?
Ooh, nice. We
Oh,
gotta
love
get it back
it.
to whoever owns it.
For sure. Now, this is great because we used a lot of examples, a lot of different constructions with worth.
Yes.
So I asked you, you said, was that pottery class worth your while?
And
Right?
this is interesting because I was going to teach this one, but I saw that we have a previous episode here
Ooh,
on All Ears English. So go check that one out. It was called This Episode is Definitely Worth Your While, 1494. That was you and Michelle, which
nice.
was like worth your while, worth every penny, not worth a dime, worthless. Totally different phrases for worth. So check that one out for a deep dive on
Oh,
those.
Amazing. We've been able to get 2 full episodes just out of the word worth, and they're
Exactly.
completely
And there'll be a
different.
part 3. We're doing a part 2 to this because there are so many
Wow.
other idioms that are really useful and great for connection.
Incredible. I love it. Okay, what else?
And then I said it was definitely worth waking up for or worth waking up early for. So this is that second construction, worth verb ing.
Yes, worth and that's important. Again, we said earlier the grammar construction really matters here. People will be
Mhm.
confused. I mean, actually, I guess casually I've heard people say it's worth waking up or worth no, that doesn't work. You can't say
No,
worth wake up for. No, no,
it
you
has to
can't.
be verb ing, yeah, and you
Yeah, it
can't,
has
like,
to
add an
be.
article if you say, like, "It was worth
No,
the waking up early," no, you have to
no.
really use these word for word because they're idiomatic.
You got it. Okay. And then I said, you ended up buying unlimited drinks, right? Worth it? And I'm
Yes,
asking you, was it worth it or is it worth it?
exactly, right? I'm like, "No, I haven't used it much at all." It's like, "I spent a lot on that, it's definitely not worth it. What was I
Ye
thinking?"
Yeah, good. And then you said, looks fancy. Oh, we found a watch. You said, looks fancy. What do you think it's worth? So we're trying to evaluate uh, how much the person paid for it, right?
Exactly, right? And then would find out where we can put this is always tricky when you find something like that, especially if it's like cash. I'm like, I guess I just give it to the closest staff member and hopefully
And
they can get it
hopefully
back
it
to
gets
people.
back to people. Yeah, you never know.
Tricky.
You never know.
Yeah, I know, right?
All right, Aubrey, what is the takeaway for today?
Yes, this verb worth. I am so glad that we got this question because we use it so many different ways. So thank you, Graciela. Send in your questions, guys. We love them.
Yes.
And we want you to be able to use these phrases to connect in English, to talk about what is worth it and what is not.
Yes. Again, as I said, resources matter and talking about what's worth it in life in so many different ways is a hot topic in a lot of ways, right?
Interesting. Yeah, you
It's
wanna
a hot
know
topic.
what the people you know value, what is worth it to them, and share the same about you. This is how we get deeper in English.
Yes, this is one of those episodes where you can say so much more about yourself and your values than what you're actually saying, right?
Exactly. Yes,
Yes,
absolutely.
interesting. All right, good stuff, Aubrey. Thanks for bringing the topic. And part 2 will be on All Ears English, maybe next week,
Yep,
sometime soon. Okay.
absolutely. So hit
All right.
follow so you get part 2.
All right. See you in part 2. Take care.
Awesome. See
Bye.
you there. Bye.